the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Your Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside episode 377 of the Locked On Senators podcast. I'm Ross Levitan in the heart of enemy territory, downtown Toronto, alongside Brandon Pillar up in Collingwood. And today we start the week as we have throughout the offseason with our SensCentral citizen. And today we have Chris Tremblay joining us from Moncton, New Brunswick. Not only is he a big Sens fan, but he's also been developing an analytical tool for Sens and NHL wide. So we get to go in depth with him on how they came about, what they're doing with it, and the plans going forward for Impact Sports. So really fun conversation coming up with Chris Tremblay. And in that conversation, we got into Erik Brannstrom because it's back in the news. Seems like clockwork. Erik Brannstrom, will he be a trade chip to address a different position? And Chris says, nuh-uh, shouldn't be the case. So I'll ask Pilsy what he thinks about the latest round of rumors. And then, again, like clockwork, Scott Wheeler puts out a list. We get mad at it. So stay tuned for all that. This is the Locked On Senators podcast, your team every day. Today is Monday, August 16th, and Pilsy, I'm so mad at Scott Wheeler, again.
Yeah, I mean, anytime he seems to put out a list, it doesn't sit well with Sens fans. I think that's a general theme here. But you know what? Take some time. Don't just look at where the Sens landed. Take some time to look through the rankings and kind of pick it apart yourself and be like, all right, is this player, this player, this player, this player, this player, this player, and this player better than Jake Sanderson? And I think maybe not all of those guys, but there's some guys where you can see his thinking and where he went with that. But it's tough for Sens fans because we've got the rose-colored glasses on with Jake Sanderson. But there's definitely some room for some argument here, I think.
100%, especially when you go back to his same rankings after the draft in October when he had Jake Sanderson as the 49th ranked prospect. This time around, he's 27th. So he's moved up 22 spots, but still, 8th ranked defenseman. To me, that's a little much. He says, again, there's still questions about his offensive upside, despite the fact I believe he was close to a point per game after the World Juniors, playing an amazing amount of minutes. And he says he's going to be upside of top 4. And the write-up is always, almost like damage control. Like he has the rank, and then it's like, no, but it's okay. Just like when he had Tim Stützle ranked 7th after the draft last year, and he leads by saying, I could see a world where in a redraft, he's the best player in the draft. Well, then why is he 7th behind Alexander Holtz? Like, huh? Are you kidding me? So there's definitely some hahs about that, but at the same time, he's got his style of player he likes. He likes small, shifty players that have a nose for the net and that are very good playmakers. So that's just the way that he values players, and that's fine. There was one other Senator on the list as well, Shane Pinto, who was unranked in the year before. And in that write-up, he goes, yeah, I don't think he'll ever be a point producer at the NHL level. And then I pull up his hockey DB. He has 7 points in 12 games at the NHL level, fresh out of college. So again, a little discrepancy between what we believe, and sure, call us rose-colored glasses, or should we say green-colored glasses, with a couple Nodak Sens making an appearance on the list there, Pilsy. But I don't know. I mean, there were 6 on his top 50 last year. 4 of them have graduated, or 5 because Pinto wasn't on there. So it's not like Scott is actively biased against the Ottawa Senators. It's just there's a very different philosophy in what kind of prospects the organization and he like.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think you could say that about pretty much the Sens organization and every scout reporter online. I think there's not many that align with the Senators. But Ross, tough for you seeing Cole Caulfield at number 2 and Shane Pinto all the way down there. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, is Cole Caulfield even considered a prospect anymore? I feel when he's playing Stanley Cup Finals, maybe that term can get thrown around, although he is still Calder eligible next year. Number 1 on this prospect rankings was who again?
Quinton Byfield. Yep, that's a tough one. Knowing the Sens were 1 pick away. Now, I'm not saying that Tim Stützle is not in that same category, but I was a big Byfield fan, and I would have loved for him to be on the Sens, but it just wasn't meant to be. We got Timmy Superstar. That's a great consolation prize for me.
Already 30 NHL points deep, which is
there we go.
That side. There you go. If you watch it on YouTube, you just saw Pillsy pointed a Dominic Hasek jersey.
I'm directionally challenged. You guys know that. You know that.
That's awesome. The guys who graduated from this list last year include Drake Batherson, Erik Brannstrom, Josh Norris was 46, and I couldn't see a handful of players who were on that list. I went back and looked at the one in 2020. Kirill Kaprizov, of course, had a bigger impact, but beyond that, there's barely a handful of guys who I thought were better at the NHL level than Josh Norris. So I think from that, Sens fans can take some solace in that fact. And again, this is just fun off-season banter. Scott's a friend of the show. He's been on 4 times with us, and our philosophies might not match, and I think that makes for the best discussion. So should we be throwing our arms saying, where's the K-train on this list, Pillsy? Or now I'm getting carried away?
Yeah, I think definitely when you're looking at Scott's list, begging for the K-train to be on that list would be a tough sell. But hey, we know what we got in the K-train. We've talked to him. We've seen what he can do. We don't need him to be on a list to feel good about him.
He's probably shooting pucks in Fargo as you're listening to this right now, but it really did, I don't know, rub me the wrong way, because again, it's a fun list and it's a fool's errand. So credit to Scott for putting himself out there, because to be right projecting a top 50 prospects, like there's such a wide range and you're never going to be right. So he knows that. It's just a matter of analyzing what you see, and he does do a good job about that. I read through all the write-ups, and you can tell he does spend a lot of time going through this. So this is not an indictment on Scott Wheeler, the writer, but it is just kind of silly that you see a 5th overall pick from the deepest draft in the last half decade, and he's being passed by 2 guys from this year's class, Luke Hughes and Simon Edvinsson, among defensemen, ranked
Brant Clark.
And Brant Clark, and Owen Power as well. So 4.
I mean, Owen Power, I can, that's justifiable. Like, first overall, it's tough to really argue against that, even though you could argue that it was not as strong a draft class. But yeah, when you're looking at Luke Hughes, Brant Clark, and Simon Edvinsson, I don't know, because those guys, they have certain qualities to them that separate them from the pack. But Jake Sanderson, he can do almost all those separating qualities almost as well, but combined, like all round, he's that kind of player. So that's where I don't see those guys as ahead of Jake Sanderson, because he's, especially when you're looking at a defenseman, he's so much more NHL ready than a guy like Brant Clark or Luke Hughes, who is so offensively minded that they're just going to get torched on defense. Whereas Sanderson, yeah, maybe he's not going to quarterback your top power play, but he's not going to allow mistakes, and he's going to have good gap control, and he can play 28 minutes a night probably at an NHL level at some point. So that's where I kind of see the top qualities being shined a little more than the value of being a great all-around defenseman.
And another guy who Sanderson will be forever linked to, Jamie Drysdale, comes in 8 spots ahead of him. To me, that's a bit of a head scratcher. Drysdale, phenomenal prospect, don't get me wrong, but he came up and he had those 2 games in the NHL, his first 2 games where he put up 3 points, and everyone goes, oh my God, Jamie Drysdale, this guy's amazing. But then they don't see the next 20 where he really struggled and ended up playing mostly in the AHL. So I think the perception plays a big role in this, and it'll be fun because this 2020 draft class was the first one where we just sunk our teeth right into it. So I want to see how this plays out in 3, 4, 5 years' time. And there's lots of hidden gems there too. Igor Sokolov being one of them. And that pick they took Sokolov with, they also got Erik Brannstrom. That was the Mark Stone trade. We're going to get to our, again, it's such a frustrating conversation now, but we have to, because Erik Brannstrom's name, a certain Ottawa Sun writer, has thrown it out in trade rumors once again. And so we'll touch on that. But before we get to that, let's have some positivity with our SensCentral citizen. So we've got Chris Tremblay joining us. He's the founder of Impact Sport. And if you go and check them out on Twitter, some of those graphs might be able to help you win some money when you're wagering next season. And where are you going to do that wagering? Well, it's obviously going to be with BetOnline. BetOnline, it's the number one sports book here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and for great reason. Not only do they have lines on absolutely everything, but they've got the best lines, the best customer service, and because you're a listener of the Locked On Senators podcast, you are entitled to a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. How's that for some incentive to sign up for a free account at BetOnline? Here's how you do it. On your mobile device or on your website desktop, just go on and type in betonline.ag. When you sign up for your free account, put in the promo code Locked On. That's promo code Locked On for a 50% welcome bonus. You put in $200, bingo, bango, bongo, there's $100 right there, ready for you to bet, to win, to earn, and then to withdraw, because then it's finally yours. So don't sit on the sidelines, get into the action, and don't forget the promo code Locked On to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. It's BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
And Ross, speaking of using analytics to win some money, I actually think Impact Sports is going to be the perfect complement to our next sponsor, which is StatHero. Guys, this is a whole new way to play daily fantasy sports. Did you know 85% of people who play daily fantasy sports lose? Well, that might sound alarming at first, but think about it. A lot of these contests, there's like 10,000 people, and only the top 10 get paid out? You don't need to be a part of that 9,990 people losing. Don't do that anymore. Check out StatHero. It's the first ever daily fantasy sportsbook that puts the player in control, and winning is within your grasp. Here's how it works. StatHero shows you their lineup. So basically, it's you versus the house. You get to log on to StatHero, see what their lineup is, and you can be like, that's what they're going with tonight. I can beat that. Or maybe you're like, wow, that's a solid lineup. I'm going to sit this one out. Bet responsibly. You got to do that sometimes. Sometimes you got to sit it out. So it's a head-to-head matchup, you versus the house. You name your stakes. I think that's the coolest part about StatHero is it's not a set stakes. You can decide, and winner takes all. Finally, the advantage is in the player's hand, not the house. StatHero is showing you their lineups ahead of time. No one else does that. So you're in total control. StatHero is the daily fantasy sports the way it's meant to be, one-on-one. Play StatHero now and change the odds. We're going to hook you guys up. Go to stathero.com/lockedon and sign up for free right now. Go ahead, do it right now. And you can get 3 times back on your first play. So why not start off your StatHero account with a big win and then triple it? That's the kind of promo they're giving you, and that's what we're hooking you up with. You're getting 300% match. Where else can you get that? You can't. StatHero combined with Locked On. Go to stathero.com/lockedon and you get a chance to go one-on-one versus the house. stathero.com/lockedon.
All right, here he is, our SensCentral citizen. It's Chris Tremblay. All right, we now get back to our favorite segment. It's now a Monday tradition through the offseason. It's our SensCentral citizen, and for this one, we're going out to the East Coast, all the way to Moncton, New Brunswick. That's where we have Chris Tremblay from Impact Sports. Chris, how you doing today? Welcome to Locked On Senators.
Pretty good. Happy to be there, really.
Oh man, we're excited to have you because you have the perfect marriage between analytics and being a lifelong Sens fan. So before we get into what you've been working on with Impact Sports, and everyone can go check it out on Twitter at Impact Sports, but without the A. So Impact with no A, Sports. Exactly. But that being said, your fandom of the Sens goes well beyond when you created this account this year. So how did you initially become a Sens fan out in Moncton?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I became a Sens fan really during the 2013 playoffs. So that was and really the very moment it was the Erik hit. I remember that. And then just the chaos that ensued after. I mean, the line brawls and just the ups and downs of that series was absolutely great. And I just, at that time I was living in Ottawa. Actually, I was studying at the University of Ottawa. And yeah, I got hooked, really. That's when I kind of jumped ship and been following the Sens ever since.
So were you a hockey fan before that, or that's kind of really what opened your eyes to hockey?
Yeah, I'd say I was obviously, I was following a lot of teams and everything. I grew up in, I grew up in Quebec City,
Okay.
in that void, within left by the folding of the Quebec City Nordiques. So, I was following a lot of teams. In Quebec City, you get fans of, a lot of teams, really, at this point. Now it's mostly Habs fans, but at that time it was kind of all over the place. And so, yeah, I was following a lot of teams, and I picked the Ottawa Senators really during that playoff. It was just fantastic.
What was your favorite moment during that Sens Habs series? So the Greiba hit is number one, and then after that, because I mean, there were so many moments. And one of the most underrated ones was Game 4. So after they had that huge win, the Pajot hat trick, the line brawl, they were down 2-0 in the third period, and you're like, oh, we're just going to be tied going back to Montreal, and then. No, it was a great comeback. Corey Conacher, I think, with 20 seconds left, tied it. And then they come out for overtime, and it's Peter Budaj. You're like, oh, my God, where's Carey Price? And sure enough, the first shot beats him. But what other moments stand out from that series for you?
Oh, just, I remember it was, how could I say? There's a few, honestly, it was the line brawl, that line brawl I remember, and just the Sens absolutely had the upper hand. I mean, size wise and everything. It was just, anyway, it was such a great series. I remember it like fondly. It's been up and down since, but I don't regret my choice of picking the Sens at all. I mean, really, it's been between the hamburger run and the playoffs push and everything. It's been just great since. And that series in particular, I mean, there's a few. Actually, my favorite moment of that playoff was actually the series after. It was against Pittsburgh. It was the I don't know if you remember. It was the Alfie. There's a shorthanded Alfie goal late.
With
I don't remember.
like 30 seconds left. I think Gonchar fed him cutting through the middle.
Yeah, and then Colin Greening scored. In double
overtime.
That was definitely my favorite. One of my favorite moments of that playoff push.
So how much of you becoming a Sens fan was the fact that they were playing against Montreal? And you, like you said, you grew up in Quebec, so they're playing against Montreal, and just the beatdown and the line brawl and winning the series. Was that kind of what did it? You're like, all right, I have no interest in Montreal whatsoever at this point. I'm jumping on the Ottawa ship. Or could it have been any other team? And if Ottawa does that, you're still supporting them?
I followed Montreal. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I followed Montreal like I followed every other team. I don't know. Yeah, tough to say. I mean, they were small at that time. They were particularly small, and just the roster that Ottawa was building, and that's just the size and the strength and everything that kind of hooked me. Also, they were fast. They were very fast, scoring lots of goals. They had Spezza on that team, Michalik. They actually had Kovalev.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned that you like a team that has some size along with skill. So when you make kind of the base of the technology that you use to grade players, how do you weigh each different part of the game to turn it into what you believe will function properly into evaluating talent?
So that's the strength, that's the strength of algorithms. That's the strength of modeling, is that what you call machine learning is that, so you got, so nowadays you got all sorts of data coming from different, measures, and you have all sorts of measures and everything. And you got puck tracking now, and you got all of that data. And the idea is to have computers learn, by themselves based on historical data. Historical data set learn what works and what doesn't, and what works more than other things, and what's more valuable, and all of the context around it. What I oftentimes, what I use as an example is, let's say, a goal, right? So when you look at the score sheet, you see a goal, you see 2 goals, 3 goals, and the value of that, that goal, when you look at a score sheet, it's worth 1 goal, right? But really, based on the context, the time on ice, how much time did the player spend on the ice, and what was his zone entry, zone exit, and all of the context around it might make it that a goal is more valuable than the next goal, right? Than another goal. So with new technology, what you do is that you have algorithms, and you let the computer kind of learn all of that relationship, and then you turn it into what you call intelligence, right? Descriptions on the players and everything. So that's, that's in simple terms, that's what it is. And it's used in, it's used in all sorts of domains. I mean, you got machine learning that drives cars. I mean, the Amazon uses them, and all sorts of different technologies use machine learning. And what we do is just apply that technology to hockey data.
Yeah, and it's an interesting kind of area that's really being expanded on, especially in hockey. I think analytics are really starting to take over, and a lot of people use them in different ways, like you were saying. Now, I'm looking at some of your graphs and charts here, and one of the analytics you use is player value. How do you come across a player value? Like, what are some of the components that the machine model, like you said, uses to adjust and find a player's value?
Yeah, so basically it's based on their entire performance on one game. The reason why we developed that our algorithm specifically is that obviously it fit our needs, it fit what we wanted to do. So we found that a lot of metrics were about who's a good player and who's a bad player, and what we were looking for was, who's a good fit on that in their deployment level. So who's a good fit on the first line, who's a good fit on the second line, third line, and same thing for deep pairing. So we wanted to work more in fit. So that's why we kind of developed this. And that's why we have all of the other metrics, which is the adjusted metric and the impact. So the performance, so the player value overall is basically a value of, how well the player is playing. And it's also, is level of deployment, right? How much does he play? Does he play a lot? Does he take big minutes, tough matchups? So it's all of those combined that, kind of determine the value of that.
So based on that, who was the Senators' best player last year, according to your metric?
Thomas Chabot.
Yeah?
Yeah, Thomas Chabot, absolutely. And I agree with it. Brannstrom, and I really want to talk about Brannstrom. He's an interesting case, but Brannstrom ranked pretty high as well. One thing I often say is that he missed the start of the season, which was particularly difficult for the Sens. So whereas Thomas Chabot, played pretty much the entire season up until a couple weeks before the end of the season, I think he was injured. So, but no, Thomas Chabot is our highest ranked Sens, and I agree with it. The guy is just fantastic, great D.
Yeah, and he's only getting better and better, and you can hope that that's going to be the case with Erik Brannstrom as well. And once we wrap up with you, that's how we're finishing off the show, talking about the rumors that it seems like he can be had for not a lot in return, at least not the elite talent that was given up to acquire him only 2 years ago. Now, what is it that gives you the hope or the realization that this guy will get to the potential that everyone knows he has somewhere? It just maybe has taken him a little bit longer at the NHL level than some people would like.
Yeah. So something I find is, when we think about players, we don't usually think about their age, right? We think about how much time he spent in the NHL up and down, and that influenced a lot of, our thinking about players. But you need to consider the age, and Erik Brannstrom started playing, going up and down the NHL at a young age. So it feels like it's been a few years where he's kind of, played in the NHL, back in the AHL. But if you look at it, he's still very young. I mean, when the season starts, he'll have just turned 22.
Yep.
So that's still particularly young, and you see those big leaps that happen in the off season, and a lot of players really, just get comfortable in the NHL at age 22. I remember, Mark Stone was a great example where, he really got comfortable at the beginning of the 2014-2015 season when he just turned 22 as well. So Erik Brannstrom, when considering his age, what we see and when we rank him based on, players that have played last year, based on players that have played under 22 years old, he ranks first, and he ranks as our best D, for players that played last year under 22. Now there's a couple players that are close. Keandre Miller the New York Rangers, and obviously Heiskanen is very close as well, and they played a full season, so I would give that a bit more weight, whereas Brannstrom played half the season, about half or a bit more than half. But still, he ranks, for players his age, he ranks very high in our things. Offensively, he ranks first as well. And it's just only defensively that he ranks about 7 out of 12 players, that were under 22. So defensively, obviously, he's not as good as offensively, but that for a different reason, it's not necessarily a horrible thing. He just needs to improve his defense a little bit, and whatever he can bring offensively is just going to outweigh his defensive, the fact that he's average defensively. So if you consider his age, his development is fine. It's very good. And he's sure to be a pretty good fit on that second pairing, now and in the future, really.
Yeah, I love hearing that, Chris, because I think that's what we're trying to tell people is a lot of fans, it's kind of, what have you done for me lately? And they start looking at the trading away Mark Stone and then seeing Brannstrom's numbers and being like, oh, well, he's not good enough. That's a bust. Trade him while you can. And it's like, okay, this is a 21-year-old small defenseman who, like you said, is one of the better offensive talents for a player in his position offensively. And yeah, the defense, it's going to take time. It takes time to learn how to defend in the NHL. So I think people just need a little more patience, and they need to understand the value that Erik Brannstrom has. Now, you talked about deployment, and I think you mentioned he'd be a guy that's suited for the second pair. How do you think the Ottawa Senators will deploy Brannstrom, and how do you think that'll affect some of these stats that you've created here?
So, to me, the writing is on the wall that, he should start the season in that, second pairing role, kind of where he finished last season, where he played last season. I mean, he was improving. The thing is, he was improving last season. From the start of the season until the end of the season, he just steadily improved, right? So, that's, to me, it all depends. Obviously, it all depends on how he comes into camp, right? So you got those big leaps to happen in the off season, and then the camp is where you see if players are ready or not. But if he's got a good camp, the writing to me is just he's suited for that second pairing. Now the left D position is interesting on the Senators roster because there's a lot of guys there. But at the end of the day, you play your best players, you play your best assets, and if some older guys don't make it on the opening day on the first game of the year, then they don't.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Brannstrom, he started his career playing with maybe not the best partners that he could have had. Gabranson, Coburn come to mind as guys who played a decent amount of minutes with, and then he finally finds a home next to Artem Zub, and then the summer comes and all of a sudden he's a trade chip again. I thought that he really held his own playing with a more defensively responsible player like Zub, who can make the first pass and get him the puck when he needs to. Now, is there a way that your machine learning or whatnot, I'm not sure on the exact phrasing, but that it can take into account like different parts? Because for one, just the eye test, when I see him going back to get pucks, he's a guy who gets hit hard often. And is that something that can be calculated? And how you can evade, getting contact? Because that's, for a smaller guy, it's going to be really important for him throughout his career to stay away from big hits as a smaller guy.
Yeah. So, transition is evaluated. So how you can, go from zone to zone successfully and everything. So that's part of the calculation. It's worth some amount of points, and, hits, the amount of hits you're taking is taken into account too. Okay. I mean, if Erik Brannstrom, so he's a bit smaller, he's a smaller defenseman, and how that's going to impact. Well, not sure. There's a lot of smaller defensemen in the league, right, that are successful. So it's not everything. It'll be him progressing to that, progressing into that role and just getting comfortable with that size, and we'll see what happens, but. At the end of the day, if he's a good player, he's a good player, right?
He's played more minutes with Ron Hainsey than any other defenseman in his time with the Sens.
No, and I really like the Brannstrom Zoo pairing. That was working fine, and I'm hoping that's what the Sens go for, but obviously we don't know everything that goes on in organizations, right? And we don't know everything, and I'm not sure what the plan is, but that's something I'd love to see again, that Brannstrom Zoo pairing.
Yeah, absolutely. My final question for you, I think Pilsy has one as well, is which player do you think is most underrated by the fan base based on what you've put together?
I think I've already said Zaitsev in the past. That was one thing I noticed, that Zaitsev was playing a lot better than fans were giving him credits for. I'm not sure where that was coming from. Maybe it was the contract, maybe it was the Leafs before. I don't know where that started, but he's playing decent. But underrated. I mean, Nick Paul, comes to mind as a fantastic third line. He was. So when we do our metrics, so one of the metric is, how good are you playing at your deployment level? And Nick Paul's a deployment level of third line, and he was the best. He was definitely one of the best players in his role. So in his specific role, so as a third line guy, he was definitely one of the best guys. So Nick Paul comes to mind as just great player, and he had success too at the championship too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think fans are really starting to see what they have in a guy like Nick Paul, and DJ Smith will tell you himself.
Pilsy, wouldn't you say this is kind of a test case of not giving up on a player you acquired for one of your stars? Like they got Nick Paul in 2014 for Jason Spezza.
Is Nick Paul not the longest standing senator from the organization now? He's gone with Bobby Ryan and Marcus Hogberg gone.
I was going to say it was Hogberg before and Andreas Englund in 2014, but now those guys have all moved on. Yeah, you're right. It is Nick Paul. So a little tire pump for Nick Paul. Pilsy, you got last?
Exactly. Yeah. So one more question for me, Chris. Thanks again for joining us. It's great to get a little bit different approach than Ross and I's approach on the show. So we love having you. Now, maybe this is putting you on the spot a little, so I apologize, but we're a goalie friendly show. So I got to ask, is there any sort of analytics that you have or that you're aware of, maybe even that really shine towards goalies more with advanced analytics? Do you guys do anything in that realm, or is that something that's maybe going to come in the future, or what's the plans for that?
The answer is easy. We're starting it for the start of this season.
Awesome.
So
hell yeah.
It was really just, we've developed the engine, during the season last year, and we've really been public about it for maybe like the past 2 or 3 months.
So just a quick question then, what are some of the stats that we can expect to see in regards to goalies?
The same idea. The only difference is that, we're probably not going to do offense with goalies. I mean, they stay in the same position. So, it'll be a bit different, but very similar, just, ranking goalies, who's better and who's a good backup, who's a good fit in the backup role, who's a good fit in a top role. So no, that's something we're doing at season start.
Well, we're looking forward to watching all of your growth with the development of your engine and all that. And we really appreciate you being a SensCentral citizen, Chris. So everyone go follow at Impact Sports. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it right here at Impact Sports with no A. Chris, thank you for being a SensCentral citizen, man. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
All right, stick taps to Chris for joining us, and make sure you go give a follow to Impact Sports. No A in Impact, but there is a lot of info on that page, so go check it out. Pilsy, there's also a lot of punch in a Built Bar. I know you want to tell us about our friends over at Built Bar. And hey, before you get into the read, talk about a natural transition. The Built Bar sponsorship. Did you see that? Built Bar is paying for every walk-on at BYU this winter. So that is phenomenal, because now we know college athletes are able to have sponsorship. So forget that. Built Bar says we want to take people who wouldn't get a chance and give them an opportunity. So credit to our friends over at Built Bar.
Oh yeah, Built Bar always doing it right. About time the athletes can get some money for their likeness, and they can get paid, not just absolutely taken advantage of. And hey, Ross, yeah, you and I might have some college eligibility left. Maybe it's time we cash in on the Built Bar athlete deal here. But If you're not planning on doing that, the best you can do is try these amazing products at BuiltBar.com. There's so many amazing flavors to choose from, and they brought back a classic, and I'm going to tell you about that in just a second. First off, you gotta know, Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I cannot express that enough. It's a healthy chocolate candy bar that you're gonna think is not gonna be healthy for you. You're gonna be like, wow, this flavor is amazing. There's gotta be a bunch of sugar in here. There can't be much fiber, probably no protein. Wrong. It's low calorie, low sugar, but high protein and high fiber. Now, I said there was a flavor they're bringing back that's an all-time classic. It's the peanut butter brownie, one of their best flavors, in my opinion. 180 calories, 19 grams of protein packed into that protein bar, and it's only at BuiltBar.com. Get your hands on one of them today, and you know we're going to hook you guys up with the promo code. So go to BuiltBar.com today and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. That's BuiltBar.com. Use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Guys, go check it out. It's Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar.
All right, Pillsy, a conversation we've had a few times already. It's the Erik Brannstrom. Are we calling it a saga at this point? I mean, all he's done is get better and better since being acquired in Ottawa. Yes, the 30 games in the 2019-20 season weren't great. No, they weren't. But certainly, I thought he added value this year, especially when paired with Artem Zub. So what's this about people in the media, especially those who are very close with the organization, peddling his name out there as a guy who could get traded for Ryan Strome, for Dylan Strome? These aren't the types of assets. If you want to move on from Erik Brannstrom, sure. Just based on the fact that you're loaded on the left side coming up in your prospect pipeline. But don't just give them away. Like these names that are being thrown out there, I'm half expecting a 1-for-1 Erik Brannstrom for Christian Dvorak in the next week.
The deal was 1-for-1, Ross. I don't want to have to deal with that. But here's the thing. I'm going to say it right now. I disavow any Erik Brannstrom trade before the end of this season, because you're finally going to get an opportunity where he's proven that he can play in a top 4 role in the NHL at the end of last season. Go back, watch his play, watch his games when Thomas Chabot was hurt. And he's proven that he has a D partner that complements him well in Artem Zub. So he now has the perfect opportunity to really show what he can do and to either silence the haters or prove them right. Now's the time, because we know, we talked about it, a guy who was ranked 27th on the prospect list, much higher in our hearts, but a guy in Jake Sanderson is going to be coming to the Ottawa Senators when he's done his college career this season. We know that's happening. And when Jake Sanderson gets here, that window for Erik Brannstrom gets tighter and tighter and tighter. But right now, he has the opportunity. So the Senators need to see what they have in him, and the rest of the league needs to see what they have in Erik Brannstrom before he's moved anywhere. Because if he's moved now, either the Sens won't get true value or they'll get overvalue. And who knows how that can really go with the young defenseman. Now, again, guys, we're talking about a 21-year-old defenseman who doesn't even have a full NHL season under his belt. How can anyone say they can truly understand his value? I don't think anyone can say that at this moment. So I don't think it would be a good idea to have him involved in any trade, because, and let's be honest, the Senators need him right now. Like, yes, they went and got Del Zotto and Holden, but they're not going to be able to do what Erik Brannstrom can do if he's put in the position to succeed. So the idea of trading Erik Brannstrom for, like you said, guys like Dylan Strome, guys like Ryan Strome, just is not appropriate at this time. And I would even go as far to say trading a guy like Brannstrom, putting him in a Jack Eichel trade, which is not going to happen, would also be a stretch. It's not a good time to do that. So I just think everyone that's shouting that they need to trade Erik Brannstrom needs to just calm down, dial it back a bit, and realize 21-year-old defensemen typically do not explode and are not NHL ready. Yes, there are exceptions to the rule, of course, but that's a handful of guys that are in the upper echelon of defensemen in the league, let alone young defensemen. We just talked to Chris. He said Erik Brannstrom's offensive numbers based on his model were among the best in the league for his age category. How could you be trying to peddle that off and to get low value on that already? I don't understand that.
Doesn't make any sense. And maybe people are seeing the start of this season where he was primarily played with Erik Branson. Didn't go so great, although it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. And then beyond this season, if you take out the COVID shortened season, his highest time on ice was with Ron Hainsey. And
a guy who could be his dad. Like, that could be his dad.
Oh, yeah. Ron Hainsey was in the league when Erik Brannstrom was 4 years old. And that aside, you look at after he played with Hainsey, the next most common line mate was Mark Borowiecki, and they played like 60 minutes together. So that sample size, to me, you're looking at two players who aren't great. And that's fair. Like, Boro obviously brings a lot of intangibles and physicality to the table, but Hainsey at this point in his career is just washed. Like, there's no way around it. And you could say the same with Erik Branson right now, who's still out there looking for a contract. And then he finally finds a home with Artem Zub, and the offense started coming. Like, this guy had a few end-to-end rushes. He was making smart decisions inside the offensive blue line, and he wasn't a complete liability defensively. Everyone's expecting him to be Erik Karlsson. And yeah, Karlsson won his first Norris Trophy at the age of 21. But not everybody is Erik Karlsson. That doesn't mean it's time to give up on what he can bring to this team going forward. I see him as an integral part when this team's ready to compete based on what I saw at the end of last year. This guy was electric and even got in a scrap. He showed, he's like, DJ, you want me to be physical? That's the kind of player you like? Watch, I'm going to go and throw down with Jace Howerluck in Vancouver. So I just think there's too much potential to give up on him at the age of 21, unless, so for me, I put him in an Eichel trade all day long, and say what you want about the money structure around that. But for me, he's in an Eichel trade, no problem. There's a few other players where I would be tempted. Of course, Matthew Tkachuk comes to mind, but I'm not putting him just out there for anybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, you need to give him his fair chance. And Erik Brannstrom has not had, you mentioned kind of compared him to Karlsson there. He hasn't been put in the positions that Karlsson was put in to be able to win that Norris, right?
Whoa. I'm contrasting him with Erik Karlsson. I think any comparison with Erik Karlsson for any player, like for that age, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment at what they're going to end up being. He's one of the best defensemen ever.
Yeah, so you can't really have that view of, well, we saw Erik Karlsson do this, so why isn't Erik Brannstrom doing it? So it's not really it's not the right path to take. And certain Sun reporter, I'm thinking, is acting a bit as a mouthpiece for the Senators, and they're trying to boost maybe Erik Brannstrom's value and see if they get any callers, or maybe put a little pressure on Branstrom, like, hey, we believe, and I'm assuming the Senators maybe believe that he could do a little more for them. We believe that you could do more for us. So either show us or we're going to ship you out of town. Maybe that, I'm not saying that's true. I'm saying maybe that's a tactic that they're trying to use here, because Erik Brannstrom is in the final year of his entry-level deal. Like, we're going to see what happens with the money here at the end of this season. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you can't, why would you trade a guy who still is on an entry-level contract, who could be a top 4 defenseman for you in a season where you need a top 4 defenseman? Like, it just, I don't see any sense to trying to trade him right now.
2 questions that I want to get out of here with on Erik Brannstrom. One, does he play another game for the Belleville Sens?
And we talked about this, Ross. I think how you need to word the question is, should he play another game? Because I don't think he should play another game, but with just the contract situation, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to start in Belleville. So I think we could see a scenario where he starts in Belleville. And like I said, DJ Smith maybe going back to his approach of, hey, we brought these veterans in, let's give them a chance. I think they can help us succeed here. And then if and when they fail, then we'll bring the young guys up. I can see a scenario where that's happening. Is that the proper approach? In my opinion, not really, but that's kind of how the cards are laid out as it is.
Question number 2. Will Erik Brannstrom play on the right side for any extended period this year?
Not with DJ Smith as the head coach. He's made it very clear. And there's been pushback. Like the fans have pushed back, and reporters have been like, hey, fans are saying this. And he's like, no, go back to my previous statement. Offensively small, skilled, puck-moving defenseman. I will not play on the right side. He hasn't been, like, some coaches, they have riddles or they leave things open-ended. He put a period on the end of that, being like, no, that will not happen. So, no, I don't know. With DJ Smith here, it's not going to happen.
All right, fun show today, Pilsy, and there's going to be lots of Brannstrom news to follow throughout, not only this summer, but through next season and into his contract that will be looming over the Sens heads after this season.
Another RFA.
Well, they've got 3 to deal with right now. Philip Gustafson, Drake Batherson, and Brady Tkachuk, all unsigned as we're recording right now. But to kind of put everyone at ease, if you look at the RFAs unsigned around the league, there's a whole lot of talent. Andrei Svechnikov still needs a new contract. Rasmus Dahlin. So all 4 of the players, including Tkachuk, the top 4 picks in 2018 are all without contracts right now because Kotkaniemi doesn't have one either. So there's so many RFAs that I don't think it's time. I believe that right now we're in that period where NHL GMs are taking their 2 weeks off in the summer because we haven't seen a player-for-player trade since July 28th, and there hasn't been a notable signing since July 27th. So I think that as we get closer and closer to training camp, and hopefully the rookies get to report a little bit earlier, we're waiting for news on that, we can finally see, some more action because the Sens, I don't know if they're done or not. I'd be happy to run it back with Pinto between Stützle and Connor Brown right now, but I think the organization is hoping to add again before they report for camp.
Yeah, I agree, Ross. And I think, this is the GM's vacation, well-earned vacation for general managers over these past few seasons with COVID and the drafting and the weird schedules. So definitely it's their time to take a break. And I anticipate the Senators will do kind of Alex Galchenyuk type of thing, where it's a guy with some upside that just no one's interested, and they can get him on a cheap 1-year deal, and they can plug him into an NHL roster at least to start the season. So I'm waiting for that kind of move to happen.
Tyler Ennis still available if you're looking for a player like that.
Hey, yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, lots of great stuff coming up for the rest of the week. We're still working on Levi Marilainen. He's happy to come on. We're just trying to find a time and a whole lot more. But for today, we say goodbye. For Brandon Pillar, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been the Locked On